Hi there, in this video I'm going to talk through how to perform this great variation on the Pilates Spine Twist. You're going to need a Swiss ball and a resistance band. And when it comes to the Swiss ball, they pretty much come in three sizes if you're not familiar with them. 55, 65, 75 centimetre diameter. Whatever one you're on, make sure that when you're sitting on it nice and upright that your thighs are not below parallel. That's kind of the cut-off point. With regards to how you sit on it, if your feet are hip width apart, it tends to be the good starting point. The closer your feet are together, the more difficult this exercise is, and vice versa, the wider, the easier it is. The resistance band can be anything really. Make sure it's tied nice and securely or looped through itself like I've got with this one, and make sure what you're attaching it to is obviously nice and secure as well. Now the brilliant thing about being on a Swiss ball when it comes to these sorts of exercises is that if the ball moves, it will denote weakness, essentially. So your objective right from the start is to keep the ball still. It's there to introduce instability and challenge your core as you're performing the movement above it. And when it comes to rotation, this idea of torso rotation or thoracolumbar rotation, it's sometimes helpful to think of these three skeletal circles we've got in our body. So there's essentially one formed between the collarbones and the shoulder blades, and then there's one formed by the rib cage, and then there's one formed by the pelvis. And when it comes to this cylinder, which is created with those three circles, that cylinder should always stay on top of itself. The pelvic circle in this instance is going to stay still. The rib cage and the collarbones are going to be rotating above that, but make sure those circles don't fall off one another. Now the start position, as I said, you want feet parallel, knees hip width apart, and sitting up nice and tall so that you're fighting gravity and you're kind of trying to lighten yourself on the ball a little bit, and that will energize your core and get you into a neutral alignment with your spine. We then bring the hands to clasp in front of our chest. Now my elbows are just off my torso, and that gives me a little bit of resistance already. I can feel that wanting to pull me back, and I've just got to engage slightly. So even from the start position, my core is waking up quite efficiently. My chin stays in line with my chest, and then my hands stay in line with that. Take a breath in, and as you breathe out, turn your torso away from the band, so you feel that tension increasing, and then breathe in to come back to the start. Of course, the tension on the band will denote the difficulty of this exercise. You can start from across your body, and then work all the way through range. And you want to get to a point where you're approaching your end rotation with maximal resistance on the band for whatever level you decide. Now, because a lot of people who will get prescribed this exercise will be limited in both rotation in terms of stiffness through their spine, but also by definition the strength available to them in that range, you might not make it very far, and you might find that the ball starts wobbling underneath. These are the things which this exercise seeks to exploit, and that's what you've got to try and counter. So when it comes to this, sometimes it's helpful to think about somebody grabbing your ribcage and spinning you round so that you get the correct rotation available. And when I said earlier about keeping these circles on top of one another, a lot of people will bow off to the side and then really not get the fundamental movement correct. The other thing which tends to happen is the neck will enter the equation, and you'll end up seeing people looking over their shoulder to give a sense of false movement, or a false sense of movement, I should say. And the other thing which tends to happen with that is you get the skidding effect of the arms. And the torso is still relatively unrotated, but the movement has come from drawing back the far elbow and almost playing this kind of tennis backhand type arrangement. So that's why I mentioned you want this triangle position between your chest and your hands. And so that if you keep that triangle in sync all the way through, you're going to be getting that pure rotation, which is what we're after. So this will really challenge you both in terms of stabilizing yourself on the ball, but also executing that pure rotation. If for whatever reason you just can't get to grips with the band involved, then doing this with your arms crossed over your chest and just executing pure rotation. So we're thinking about that axis of rotation from the crown of the head down to the tailbone. That can be a really nice alternative. If you're kind of somewhere between the two, between not being able to do the band, but that's too easy, well, simply close your eyes and make sure that you're keeping that ball beautifully still. And if you want another added element of difficulty, just bring the heels off the floor, and that will reduce your base of support and make this challenge even greater, particularly if you do that with your eyes closed. As I mentioned at the beginning, if you want to make this more difficult, bringing your feet closer together, and then you can get a really good balance challenge incorporated that way. Whichever way you want to play this, keeping the ball still is the number one objective, and getting the pure rotation above that so that you're really tapping into the things which have become stiff, which have become weak, and that's that rotational strength. Now once you've done it one way, you just spin round and face the other way. Try if you can to make sure you've got the same tension. I think that's why a looped band, like I've got here, is a little bit better, because if you keep the ball in the same place and you come to that position in front of your chest, when you swing around the other way, you're essentially guaranteed the same amount of tension. So we're giving a little bit more objectivity as to how one side correlates to the other, and most people will find they've got a substantial deficit on one side for that rotational strength, and therefore that rotational control, and therefore the rotational range of movement. So that's why I really like this variation. It covers a lot of things in one exercise. It's a nice challenge. If you want to, you can take your hands further away from the body if your shoulders are feeling robust, and you can really get some good increase because of that increased lever arm that you're generating. So it's quite a versatile exercise, while also being quite a fun one, quite a challenging one. And at the same time, there's not really any safety issues. You're not going to be forcing anything. You are in control of the movement. And the final point to make is that kind of generalized point with resistance band exercises. Even though they're pretty humble tools, they will let you know very quickly when there's a poverty of quality in your movement. And that's just by the fact that if you allow it to bounce when you're moving, whatever it is, a rotational exercise or just moving your hands apart, if you can stop that bounce happening, that will show you that you're getting that very good seamless activation of contractile tissue and then the control back as well. So they're really a nice window into how well you can execute a movement, and therefore really helps kind of hone that process and improve the quality of your movement. And that's going to reduce the shearing forces through sensitive structures and just improve the neuromotor patterns. So that's why I really like resistance bands as a tool for this type of exercise. Anyway, there's the modified version of the spine twist. Have fun with this one, it's a really great one. Just remember, ball still, dissociate the movement of the rotation above, make sure that you're not cheating with arm skidding or neck twisting, and you'll have all the tools you need to do the spine twist really well.